Good afternoon and good morning, depending on where you are in the world. It's wonderful to have you back here. We're going through the masteries in the Sovereign Way. The Sovereign Way is a program of spiritual development, and it consists of 8 metaphysical masteries that, when you embody them, helps you to hold the poise of sovereign living. So it allows you to live a very graceful experience of flow state, of exquisite love, of beautiful magic and miracle beyond measure. And we've gone through the Sovereign Way sequentially for the last few weeks, and all of the replays are available here in the Sovereign Way group and on YouTube, wherever it is that you're watching this. And we've arrived at a really, really cool threshold. This is where we start talking about the outrageous mastery of surrender, of conscious adventuring across energy fields, across thresholds of consciousness, across game boards, so to speak. But let me tell you a symptom of how you can tell that you've arrived at this stage in your enlightenment training, right? Because that's what's going on here, is that you're on a human journey going deeper into God. And so God is training you for that journey by taking you across different landscapes of becoming. And what you've noticed now, when you get to the point of adventuring, is that you find yourself staring in some ways at a desert. It's very common, by the way, that God isolates those who are called to miracle work, light work, prophecy, apostleship, or any great spiritual calling. It's very common that he gives you the anointing and then isolates you from the world, which leaves you confused. Like, why is it that you've given me the ability to prophesy or to heal or to do miracle work, and you've removed me from the mission field where I imagine I could do the most good? Why? What is the meaning of this? You come into incredible spiritual authority. You've cultivated your mindset and your vibration, your energy field. You've been called into action. You felt God say, right, the clarion call has gone out and it's time for you to go out and to go into the world and be this incredible thing you're being. And then suddenly you find yourself wandering in the desert. You notice that the systems and the ways that are supposed to work aren't working. And you know it's not because you're doing it wrong. You know the law of attraction. You tend well to your energy field. You choose positive thoughts. You're a good steward of your mind. You've changed your diet. You've added more yoga to your exercise regime, perhaps. So why isn't it working? I'm going to draw your attention to something interesting here, because there is a little bit of a downside to the incredible quest for truth that you've been on up until this point, because you've trained yourself to notice your flaws and foibles more often than most people. And this has meant that you've been able to tweak the coordinates of your consciousness and to be in a state of self-correction, which is done the inner work for you, and you've come to an experience of ascension and awakening. But also you've allowed yourself to seduce your attention so that you're very often seeing a version of yourself a little less than you are, because you're looking out for the things that you can improve. You're looking out for the things that you can fix. You're keeping your focus a little too long on the things that you can fix and change. And that's okay. It's a remnant from the very intense phase of self-development and progression that you've been through these last few years. But it is time for that to change, because now you're entering a new phase of your consciousness, a phase of your enlightenment. You're entering a new system of being, a new field of awareness. And you'll see later in this lesson that a field of consciousness is like a game board for a particular vibrational reality. And ergo, if you're in a new field of consciousness, then you're also on a new game board. And in a new game, the rules change. So that means we need to ask and pray and intend and move and serve differently, because the rules of being change. And let's look at how we got here. Let's look at our journey in the sovereign way so far. Number one, the first mastery is remembering. We've talked about remembering the truth that transcends all time and space. Remembering that there are three elements in the universe: source, spirit, and substance, and that you are an individualized expression of that trinity, and so is everything else. And the second mastery is recognizing, because when you remember this, you can begin to recognize the difference between truth and the story that is manifest in particularized reality. You recognize the difference between self and personality, essence and structure, home and house. And that leads you to the third mastery, because when you can recognize these differences, then you can also choose to effectively release story. You can release structured paradigms and error in your subconscious. You can release stagnant energy that builds up inside your vibrational field. You become much more effective in your forgiveness. So when you have remembered and recognized and learned how to release, you go through a training period of expansion. That's the fourth mastery, is expansion. Because when you can effectively let go and release patterns and systems that belong to an outdated version of you, then you can effectively expand to increase your capacity for meeting the challenges of life. So the challenges of life can become greater because you have the capacity to meet them. You don't get overwhelmed anymore. And that means greater outcomes. It means greater adventures. It means deeper impact. It means more spiritual transmission. And that brings you to the fifth mastery, because when you're ready for expansion and quantum growth, you need to hone your higher faculties. So the fifth mastery is genius. You hone your higher faculties and you really condition the marvelous mind for processing faster and smoother and more complex realities. Yes, so now you're ready for more complex realities. And that gives you the authority to learn the sixth mastery in the sovereign way, which is alchemy. Because when you have the great spiritual authority that comes with cultivating the previous masteries, remembering, recognizing, releasing, expansion, and genius, now you need to learn the principles for wielding that vibrational influence. So you learn that alchemy is the infusion of essence into structure. You learn that it's about merging the philosopher's stone, which is what is manifest, with the elixir of life, which is the river of potential. So you're reunifying spirit into substance to allow a greater outcome. You're turning lead into gold, essentially. Now, with this level of spiritual authority that you now embody, remember, spiritual authority is essentially source is your intention, that's knowing, consciousness, which commands spirit, as on this side, which commands spirit to move substance, like the breath of wind across the Sahara Desert that shifts and shakes the sand dunes of becoming, the undulating manifestations of particularized reality. So the more you embody a knowing of yourself and all things as source, spirit, and substance, the greater authority you have in practicing the alchemy of creation. You have greater authority, which means you've been ordained for greater impact, for greater influence. So with this level of spiritual authority, it means that your next mission then, the next training phase that you go through, is to learn to let the sovereign hand of God be the momentum and direction for all your creation. That's what adventuring is about. Adventuring is not fundamentally about learning how to be brave enough to take a trip or jump out of an airplane from time to time. It is truly life's adventure. Can you let go of the riverbanks and allow the river of God's knowing to be the momentum that shapes your life's experience? So that's why the seventh mastery in the sovereign way is adventuring, true adventuring, outrageous surrender, learning how to realign into God's flow state. And that means that if this isolation phase wasn't a part of your training, if you didn't have to go through this bizarre phase of isolation, then your attachment to egoic, cultural, societal, economic systems would always subconsciously influence the direction of your vibrational command. Let's take a very quick look at the model of human consciousness again. So source, spirit, and substance are all one thing. They are the Trinity, indivisible but whole. And the infinite creative aspect of that, which perhaps you could say is the mother aspect of God, because it is the loving consciousness that is in the power of motion, which is moving through your framework of consciousness, taking on the shape of your creative declarations, projecting into a quantum fabric, which rearranges itself according to your vibrational impact, creating the lived manifest experience that you're experiencing right now, which means that you're in a system where you witness the manifestation of your beliefs. They trigger various emotional responses by you, which create quantum cognition flow. So your thoughts correspond to those vibrations, creating feelings, and those feelings very often govern your actions in the world. And so you have here one player playing a particular game. So you can see here that this is your field of consciousness, and this is your lived experience. So your lived experience really is like the game board that you're living on, where there are certain rules that apply, rules that you've made agreement with, and that you are projecting creation or creative possibility according to the rules you've made agreement with. So if God was going to anoint you for work that is greater than your current experience, then he must remove you from the systems that you're already tied to and aligned with in order for you to re-know yourself. So the isolation phase, or the being in the desert, the learning how to adventure in the desert, is a training phase where you're shifting your identity even further from the world of form, so you're even more of an embodiment of your Christ consciousness. Now the collective structure is no longer the source of your life. Instead, it's the vehicle of your experience of it. So the collective structure is not the source of your life. It's the vehicle of your experience of life. And this is fundamentally, when you maintain this mindset, this framework of consciousness that is adventuring, that is fundamentally a state of absolute abundance, because your awareness is aligned with the creative source that expresses itself as your life, not with the structured stage on which your life is playing out. So to begin with, adventuring is just a phase in your enlightenment training, right? When you're first brought to the desert, where God says, right now, let's see if you can convert potential into mana. Let's see if you truly have the vibrational mastery you claim that you have, and you can turn potentiality into actual form just by knowing it. So let's see if you can. So he'll remove all the pipelines, he'll remove the mission field, he'll remove the clientele, he'll remove all the resources that you thought you relied on, and you'll see, do you really have what it takes to live the calling that you're called for? And of course, he already knows that you do. You don't have to prove anything to God. It's yourself you need to prove it to, because when you prove it to yourself, it becomes embodied as one of the masteries in your consciousness. And then it's lifelong. So to begin with, it's just a phase. But then ultimately, when your ability to be truly surrendered and knowing it is safe because you have the vibrational mastery of creating mana out of potential, then you're able to maintain flow state, an outrageous conscious surrender in all circumstances. Whatever's going on out here, you're always able to call on the mastery of adventuring. In all circumstances, you can maintain flow state. And that's essentially what conscious surrender is about. So to become a true adventurer, which is someone who is surrendered to go where the call takes you no matter what, you must learn how to better sense the flavors and textures of life and experience the richness of luscious, loving abundance while wandering in the barren desert. Now, the result of this is an enrichment and an uplift of your life beyond measure, which you then radiate by default. When you're no longer trying to stay alive, you liberate an enormous amount of energy, which flows into your energy field, and you become visibly brighter. You become more miraculous, more magical. Things just flourish in your presence, and you become rich beyond measure. Now, it's not safe to go out adventuring while your identity is still attached to form consciousness. So if you've had the idea, oh, let's get an RV and go out and save the world and create healing retreats and be a TEDx speaker, and you're still identifying with economic systems or cultural paradigms of what is reasonable or appropriate, or if you're identifying with personal rules about how you need to show up in order to be valid, if you're still woven into all of these systems, when you go out to save the world, then you will fall. Why? Because you're trying to be a conscious manifester, a co-creator. You're trying to architect an experience that has actually got nothing to do with where God is bringing you. You see, you do get to be a conscious creator, you do get to be a manifester, but some people are destined to remain in one log of consciousness and then become master manifestors within that log of consciousness, within that realm where certain rules apply. If you know where you live and you know what rules apply, you can become a masterful manifester, a masterful player in that realm. But if you are an ascending master, if you are on the path of conscious enlightenment, if you're a human hero on the journey home, then you're going to be transcending realms of consciousness so often that there is no point you trying to master the rules of each of these levels. Let me explain. Let's look at the Hawkins scale again. So this is the map of human consciousness that was derived by Dr. David Hawkins. And it goes that we can calibrate the extent to which we know the truth that I am that I am. We can calibrate how much you do know that, and we can plot it on an imaginary scale from 0 to 1,000, where 0 is complete illusion. There is no point to anything, and I'm just an accident. And 1,000 is 100% embodied knowing. This is Christ consciousness. And Jesus was the one who accomplished this, who realized this for the human collective. And as we ascend on this scale, we see increasing levels of sentience. At the bottom here, we have shame, guilt, apathy, grief, fear, anger, pride. At 200, we have neutrality, but we also have courage here. We're motivated by practical things, by making money, fitting in, things of the body, things of the health, things of the image. And then at 300, we have willingness. We have the charming personality. We have the sincere desire to positively impact the world. We have emotionally sensitive and amazing leaders in politics and in medicine and in innovation. And then up to 400, we have reason. We have sophisticated intellectual opinions and positions. We have brilliance in understanding, synthesizing, and formulating. That's the genius mastery that we've already covered a couple of weeks ago. And that's all there in the log of consciousness called 400 on the Hawkins scale. So already you can see that as you're increasing incentions, as you're embodying more awareness of who you really are, you can see that you make new agreements with what is true and what is noble and what is right for you. And you can see that as a result, creative life force changes its projection and life changes. So that's what I mean when I say that the game boards change and the rules of the game change. Because at level 200, what is most important is that you achieve that promotion, so you get the pay rise, so you can afford the lifestyle improvement that you would like to experience. Whereas at the level 400, it's far more important that you understand, synthesize, and formulate effectively complex concepts that allow you to imagine new realities. This is what Albert Einstein did. He spent his whole life at the log of consciousness at 490. And he never achieved personal oneness with the divine, but it didn't matter, because what he did do was formulate so effectively that he burst open our understanding of the divine, both on a microcosmic scale and as far out into galactic outreach. So we mustn't confuse ascension with 1,000 being the goal, and we have to constantly make our way up there. We have to understand that it's all about coming into truth with who you are and what your divine destiny is. So that's 400 right there. But at 500, we have love, awe, and wonder. We have a universe which is characterized by the healing touch, exquisite transmission, where grace takes over as your core operating system. You see, from 500 and below, systems rule, and from 500 and above, grace rules. So going further up, we have joy, we have peace, and at 800 we have enlightenment. This is where the avatars live: the Buddha, Eckhart Tolle, Yogananda, Paramahansa, and Krishna, and Alan Watts, and these extraordinary characters who really truly got I am that I am. And then at 1,000, we have perfect union of divine and human. We have the perfect fusion of essence and structure. And according to researchers, Jesus Christ is the only one who calibrated at 1,000, which makes him the Messiah, because that means that it was that character, Jesus of Nazareth, who embodied that perfect knowing and realized it into the potential for the human collective. But anyway, what I'm saying here is that as you're participating consciously with your ascension, you are transcending different logs of consciousness as you go along, which means that your reality is changing very often. And the rules that you come to rely on in one log of consciousness no longer apply in another log of consciousness. So now I want you to think about that manifestation that you've been working on, the image, the vision that you've got in your mind. Perhaps you want to be a TEDx speaker, or perhaps you want to create a retreat center, or maybe you want to run a successful business, or maybe you just want to heal the past, or maybe you want to reconcile with a family member. Now, they say that if you can conceive it, then you can make it so. And theoretically, that's true, given that the human consciousness shapes the malleability of quantum form. So in other words, think and grow rich, right? Ask and you shall receive. Keep something in your mind and then it'll come to form. If I can conceive something and focus fully onto the coordinates of that thing in a manifest realm, then the world should shape itself around that, and the law of attraction should bring it to me, or should bring the coordinates of the fabric to me, like the sand shaping in the Sahara. And yet, so many things that you've tried to form in this way have not manifested, have they? They've not come to form. Is that true? Or have you gotten every wish you ever wished for? Or are there some things that seem bizarrely hard to grasp? Well, I put it to you, what if there is an emanation, an energetic transmission that is coming from you that is much, much stronger than those vain and futile thoughts of worldly life that you think matter? What if that emanation is your soul song? What if it's your true prayer? What if it is truth? And what if within the universe of that radiation, this worldly ideal that you have in mind cannot be done? What if the vision you've made for yourself, what if that cannot be done in the realm of consciousness that you're moving into? What if it cannot be done in the beautiful symphony of a perfect harmony? Who would strike a false note in a perfect harmony? What if being a TEDx speaker is not your highest calling? What if opening a chocolate factory in the Rocky Mountains is not actually your highest calling? I know it will fail. That's what I've experienced. And do you have all of the information, the fact, the wisdom, and the legacy in place to know if what you are intending to manifest is indeed harmonious with that emanation of truth that's coming from you? If you're on a life path to discover truth or to ascend the layers of consciousness the way a nymph ascends through the layers of water to become a dragonfly at the final unveiling, then it does not serve you to invest in mastering the rules of manifestation within each of the systems of being that are relevant to the different layers of consciousness that you're ascending through. You get the logic of that? Let's say you spend a while in the world of 200, where in order for you to get that promotion, so you can get the pay rise, so that you can get the lifestyle improvement, you've got to increase your output by 200%, and you've got to make sure that 17 of those contracts are won by next Friday. These are linear rules that apply at that level of consciousness. But if you're ascending beyond that and you're moving into the 300s or 400s or 500s, and you're still aiming for that outline, then you can see that you're operating on a different game board from the pieces that you're trying to move. Because in the realm of 500, that outline is not relevant. In the realm of 500, you're supposed to be living in grace. You're supposed to be allowing the flow of God's hand through you, which means that if your attention is on the particularized reality of that outline that you need to accomplish according to the laws of 200, then you're not living by the laws of 500. So you're living across thresholds. You're playing across game boards, as I like to say. You're trying to win a game of Scrabble playing with Monopoly pieces on a chessboard. That's what's happening here. And so perhaps this manifestation or this vision that you believe is noble, and yes, it is noble and it's worthy and it's good, being a TEDx speaker or starting retreat centers, but perhaps the way you've outlined it is simply not in congruence with your highest truth, with the flow that carries you into and through all the treasures you need to collect in order to have that vision. Listen, if it can't be done, the thing that you want to do, right? Because you're in the desert. If it can't be done, let's say you want to be a healer and you want to heal 75 people and you want to create a healing program, but you're in the desert. There isn't 75 people here for you to heal. And let's say that everything you've invested in so far seems to have come to naught. Would that be disappointing? Yes, of course it would be disappointing. Would it matter? No, it wouldn't matter. It wouldn't matter to your life's experience. It wouldn't matter to God's ability to bring you into a reality that's even more luscious and miraculous than you could even dream of. It doesn't matter to the threshold that you're crossing anyway into a manifestation that is way cooler than the one you dreamed up. Listen, this is a real mastery. This level of surrender is truly exquisite. And this is formulated a little in one stanza in Rudyard Kipling's very famous poem called If. He writes, if you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss, and then lose, and then start again at your beginnings and never breathe a word about your loss, that's true mastery. That's true surrender. That's true allowing. That's allowing what is. Knowing that the agony that seems to have come from me sacrificing my life's vision, my great legacy on the altar, taking Isaac to the altar like Abraham did, and saying it doesn't matter if I don't get to heal 75 people with this miraculous anointing you've given me, God. It doesn't matter if I don't become a TEDx speaker or I don't become a best-selling author. It doesn't matter. If you can arrive at that level of freedom and liberation, then you know that you're ready for adventuring. Because you're not going to win every gamble, because you're not a slave to the law of attraction. You won't win every business transaction because you're not a slave to the corporate system. You're a disciple of truth, which means if you surrender to that, you will be guided on a flow of synchronicity with the most miraculous kingdom of miracle and magic. You know, in a field of human consciousness at around 200 to 300, around here where the majority of the people in the world live, systems are incredibly useful. That's because there isn't a strong inner compass for discerning what is truth and what is story, what is love and what is not love, what is manifest and what is potential. You know, guidelines in those realms of consciousness, guidelines help as frameworks for directing movement into what is beneficial, like traffic lights. It's an incredibly useful system of regulation for directing people into compliance with a collectively agreed upon way of being. So you're not supposed to fear system. You don't need to be angry with system. You don't need to be angry with the need for compliance. You need to accept that most people are not as liberated in consciousness as you are, and they need system. So in this field of consciousness, where systems matter, where the career ladder matters, where systems of education are important, where bureaucracy and politics must be honored, because these are the cogs and the mechanisms of the beehive, please be compassionate and forgiving in the need for such universes. But understand that that's not your vibrational universe. But others that you meet do live in a game board where these systems actually matter. And it's not your job to free them from it. It's your job to free you from it into the field of consciousness above 500, where we're working with great energetic genius. Here we're working with the frequency of love and grace. Intuition and synchronicity are the systems that guide our movements. Joy is the currency. Your being in joy is the currency that unlocks the mana to provide for you what you need. It's your decision-making, your opportunities and your possibilities. All of these things are wrapped into the system of grace, which means that you have very little conscious manifesting, co-creating, I'm an architect of my life authority, because here you are practicing allowing the flow to be what brings things together for you. Now, here's what I need you to know if you're going to be a good player across game boards, is to understand that every single field of consciousness has a challenge, has a divine thread of darkness woven into the fabric of it. Ascension doesn't exclude evil. No, evil doesn't belong to the dense layers of human consciousness. It's in the fabric of the universe. It's in the air that we breathe. It's a part of every single game at every single level. In fact, it's a good and necessary ingredient in the way of life. The snake was already in the garden. It's in the mind of God. So imagine now, if you will, trying to win that game of Scrabble when you're playing with Monopoly pieces on a chessboard. You understand, this is the feeling of being in the desert. This is when it seems that you've been plucked out of your calling and plopped somewhere miles and miles and miles away from the opportunity to have any real impact. You've been given the wrong pieces and the wrong game boards and the wrong rules, it seems, and your job is to allow grace to win the game for you, because nothing you can comprehend is going to do the job. You're an ascending master. Keep remembering that. So you're traveling across realms of consciousness. You're traveling across different game boards. You're traveling across different rules. So there's no point in you attempting to master each level. So the core principle of freedom then is the ability to know where you are on the game board, which systems are running, and how to be free between those systems. And here's something else. Others around you are watching you, and they have no idea what you're doing. They have no idea what you're up to. They do not understand. Insanity seems sane to the insane. Here's some words by Carl Sagan. He said, imagination will often take us to worlds that never were, but without it, we go nowhere. In spiritual teaching, insanity refers to being asleep, to being lost in illusion. And the Buddhists call it mad delusion, and the Christians call it false idolism. And it's being utterly seduced by creation and blind to the creator. You're believing the hologram or the structure or the stage or the game board, whatever word you want to call it. You're believing that the actual manifestation, you're believing the sand dunes are more real than the breath that moves them. That's insanity as far as the awakened ones are concerned. But to the sleeping collective, doesn't our enlightenment seem insane? Doesn't our belief in fantastical potentials and our unflinching faith in the unseen seem insane? Our unflinching faith in the unseen. Let me tell you what is insane. One of my students is a high-powered, overachieving adrenaline junkie who's a blind chef. She went through the full Sovereign program in 2020, and she's since climbed Kilimanjaro. Blind, she can't see anything. Now, she described to me how she does a flip on a balance beam. Right? If you know gymnastics, there's a balance beam and you can do a flip on it. So she described to me how to do a flip on the balance beam when you're blind. To do a flip on the balance beam when you can't see where it is, you need to move by knowing. You start by feeling the position of your body in space and knowing the contours of your physicality. You feel the beam under your feet, which is what is right now, and you align yourself physically and mentally with the laws of the beam. You know its width, you know its length, and you know its rigidity. Then you intend. And then you move through the multi-dimensional vision of your mind by feeling it. The brain knows the precision required, and you don't interfere with the mathematics. You just go. Now, not interfering with the mathematics is the adventurer's greatest challenge, because our natural animal desire for control, right? In nature, an animal uses its superpower for thriving and surviving. And the superpower of the human animal is the intellect. So just as the cheetah runs and the hummingbird flies, the human processes. So we're geniuses. We're incredibly good at controlling the intellectual process of things. But the thing is that the human animal doesn't know anything. You don't even know how to make a cup of tea in the morning. You don't know how to emit the right electrical signals to contract the correct fine motor muscles to grasp the box of turmeric and ginger tea bags. You don't know how to do that. You just do it. You just intend to get the box out of the cupboard, and you just trust that the workings of the mechanism will play out. Here's the thing. An adventurer is more than just an animal of nature and more than just a person of culture. An adventurer lives in a different system, one of surrender and grace. Carl Sagan also says, Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. The beam is there. Even if you're blind to it, the beam is there. And what lies ahead of you now in the desert, in your blindness, is a balance beam that is very thin. They say that the path gets narrower and narrower the closer you get to God, because the truer you are, the less you can bear to be apart from him. The purer your consciousness, the less room you have in your energy field to go off track. More truth attracts more truth, and the truth is not wide and complex at all. It's very, very simple. So let me ask you, can you know that the beam is there and move? Remember what my student taught us about how to move on a thin beam you can't see. You need to move by knowing. You start by feeling the position of your body in space and time, knowing the contours of your physicality. What is the landscape of my existing framework of consciousness? What are the creative declarations that I am now in alignment with? What are the laws of the beam here where I stand right now? And then you need to feel the beam under your feet, which means you need to be truly grounded into what is. You need to be truly grounded, not attached to, but grounded into what is already. That's feeling the beam under your feet. Remember, this is a part of the expansion mastery from week 4, being grounded into what already is, because that's your starting point. And the rule of the desert, the first rule of the desert, is that you deal with what is only. Who do I serve now? Whoever's in front of me. What do I do now? Whatever's next on the list. But what's going to happen 17 hours from now when the thing might none of that. Only this. Because you're on a balance beam that you can't see. And that's the first rule, is just do whatever is in front of you. And then you move by intention. You move by knowing only. And you trust that all of the mathematics are already coded into your knowing. You would not be on this mission if it wasn't the case. But you're interfering with those mathematics. You're interfering with the outline of the outcome. That's what sets you off course. So I'm going to ask you again. Can you now, in the desert, know where that invisible beam is? Narrow as anything. And can you move? Are you ready for outrageous surrender? It's almost time. Who has the courage for discovery? Comment right now. Comment. If you're in YouTube or in Facebook or here in the live Zoom room, comment right now. I'm ready for discovery. Write it down. Affirm it here in this shared space. Be received by others as one who is already ready for a life phase of extraordinary spiritual adventure. Are you ready? Yes, we've got someone who's commented, I'm ready for discovery. Good. I'm ready for discovery. Because what's going to happen now as a part of this training phase, as a part of this phase of life that you're in your enlightenment, the development of your enlightenment, is that God is going to blow your mind with how things come to form, with how outcomes come about. God is going to blast all of the rules that you've ever known to smithereens. And you're going to be called left and right in ways that you never would choose. You're going to seem unreasonable and insane to everybody who looks upon you. And you're going to know that you're the only sane one around here. Here's another beautiful quote from Carl Sagan. Somewhere, something incredible is waiting to be known. By you. Nestled in the Sovereign Way program is a 5-week accelerator program called Adventurer. And this is an advanced level game of philosophy and energetics for the purpose of freeing the heart and mind from the game board of worldly system and bringing you into the game board where grace is the way and joy is the currency, where you turn villains into allies just by the nature of your presence, where you know the art and craft of authorizing and receiving miracles, and where you live with such an embodied trust that when God says, come, you come. If you're ready for that 5-week spiritual accelerator program called Adventurer, come and find us. Thank you very much for joining live today. We've done an introduction to the outrageous surrender, the mastery that is embodied trust, and the practice that involves. And I'm inviting you to come and learn even deeper. So come and find us. Thank you for joining us live. I'm going to turn off the live stream and we're going to take questions in the Zoom room.